The haunted road of Clinton Road, ... In the dark heart of New Jersey lies Clinton Road, a stretch of highway known for its eerie atmosphere and terrifying reputation. Locals speak of it in hushed whispers, warning travelers to avoid it after sunset. The stories that surround this road are countless, but the most chilling tale comes from an incident in the early 1990s. One autumn night, a man named Ricard was driving home from a late shift at work. His route took him down Clinton Road, something he usually avoided, but it was the quickest way and he was tired. As he drove, the thick trees lining the road seemed to close in on him, the branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to his car. The wind was howling, making the leaves swirl in erratic patterns, and the road appeared to stretch endlessly before him. Suddenly, as he approached the infamous Dead Man's Curve, his headlights flickered and dimmed. His heart raced. He had heard the legend stories of ghostly apparitions, phantom trucks, and cursed spirits, but it was just a road, right? Just a coincidence? His car began to sputter and jerk, as if something unseen was pulling it backward. Then, in the middle of the road, he saw a shadowy figure standing in his path. It was small, maybe the size of a child, but it was cloaked in darkness, features impossible to make out. Ricard slammed on his brakes, his car skidding to a halt inches from the figure. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the figure moved, slowly walking toward the car. Ricard's breath caught in his throat. He fumbled for the door locks, but they wouldn't budge. The figure got closer, and as it did, he could see its face, a pale, gaunt child with hollow, lifeless eyes. Panicked, Ricard tried to reverse, but the car wouldn't move. The figure now stood just outside his window, staring at him with a vacant, haunting expression. It raised a hand and pointed to the nearby woods, lips moving silently, as if whispering a secret meant for Ricard alone. With a final burst of adrenaline, Ricard managed to restart the car. He slammed the accelerator, swerving past the figure and speeding down the road. In his rearview mirror, he saw the child standing motionless in the middle of the road, watching him leave. When he finally made it home, shaken and pale, Ricard told his wife what had happened. She looked at him in horror and said, "You didn't stop at the bridge, did you?" Confused, Ricard shook his head. The stories say if you see the child on Clinton Road, you're supposed to throw a coin into the river. If you don't, they say the spirit follows you home. For weeks after, Ricard felt a presence lingering in his house doors, creaking open by themselves. The feeling of cold, invisible hands brushing against his skin. The final straw came one night when, lying in bed, he heard a faint whisper. He turned over, and there, standing at the foot of his bed, was the child from Clinton Road, its empty eyes staring down at him. Ricard moved out of his house immediately after that night. He could no longer bear the constant sensation of being watched, the flickering lights, or the sound of soft whispers in the corners of his mind. But even after leaving, the nightmares followed him. Every night he dreamt of Clinton Road, of the child, of those hollow, lifeless eyes. No matter how far he ran, it seemed the curse had already claimed him. He sought help from paranormal investigators, desperate to break the spell. One team agreed to accompany him back to Clinton Road, hoping to put the spirit to rest. They were armed with cameras, audio equipment, and more than a few nervous glances as they drove toward Dead Man's Curve under the cover of night. The air was heavy with dread as they arrived at the spot where Ricard had seen the child. It was eerily quiet, no wind, no rustling leaves. The paranormal team set up their gear, scanning the road and the woods. Ricard stood at the side, his heart pounding, clutching a coin in his hand. He wasn't taking any chances this time. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath became visible in the cold air, and a deep sense of unease washed over them. The investigators' equipment began to malfunction, cameras flickering, microphones picking up faint whispers that no one could make out. But Ricard knew. "She's here," he whispered, eyes wide, as he saw movement in the shadows. Out of the darkness, the figure emerged again, the same child, standing in the exact spot where Ricard had first encountered her. The paranormal team froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. The child's eyes glinted with an otherworldly glow as she slowly stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Ricard, He stepped toward the bridge, his hand shaking as he prepared to throw the coin into the river below. As he raised his arm, the child stopped and tilted her head. The whispers grew louder now, surrounding them, filling the air with a sinister chant that none of them could decipher. Rickard hurled the coin into the water, but nothing happened. The child remained, still staring, her face now twisted into something far more menacing. That wasn't enough, one of the investigators muttered, wide-eyed. She's not just a spirit, she's something darker. The wind began to howl, and the ground beneath them seemed to tremble. One of the cameras was thrown to the ground by an invisible force. The child, now inches from Rickard, reached out with a hand that seemed to stretch unnaturally long. He stumbled back, feeling a crushing weight on his chest, as if the very air was being sucked from his lungs. "You can't leave," a voice whispered in his ear. It was the same voice from his house, the same one that had haunted his dreams. In a moment of desperation, Rickard screamed, "What do you want from me?" The child's lips curled into a smile twisted, inhuman, and she spoke for the first time. "You ... Before anyone could react, the child vanished into thin air. The whispers ceased, and the night returned to an eerie silence. The team looked around in disbelief, wondering if the ordeal was over. Rickard collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The investigators helped him up, their faces pale with fear. "We need to leave," one of them said, but as they hurried back to their car, something felt off. The night had become too still, too quiet, and as they started the engine, they noticed the road seemed different longer, darker, as though it was leading them somewhere they didn't want to go. They sped off, but no matter how far they drove, Clinton Road seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The trees loomed closer, the shadows deeper. Rickard looked in the rearview mirror, and there, standing in the road behind them, was the child, her eyes glowing in the dark. They never made it home that night. No one ever heard from Rickard or the team again. Their car was found days later, abandoned and rusted, as if it had been sitting there for decades. To this day, people still avoid Clinton Road after dark, and those who dare to travel it whisper about the fate of those who don't heed the warnings. The child is still there, they say, waiting for her next victim, waiting for those who forget to throw a coin into the river. But now, the coin may not be enough to save you, because once Clinton Road claims you, it never lets you go.